I've never introduced anybody under 18. That sounds so wrong on some level. Get your minds out of the gutter. Here,
not yet.
you can keep yours there. We'll discuss this later. Let's get away from that. 1 second. I want to see what Amir has to say. Ladies and gentlemen, Amir.
Hi.
Kind of talk into the beer.
I'm gonna tell a few jokes. Well, first of all, I used to think recess was fun. But then come the summer, and then it becomes torture. We're out there, we get DPA, we're out there for a little bit more than 20 minutes, running in the heat. I'm just so sweaty. I'm burning. I just wish I could just stay inside. Then for some reason, summer camp, I just want to stay outside all the time. There's just some difference, I don't know. And,
Knock knocks.
It's a slow build.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Dwayne.
Dwayne who?
Dwayne the bathtub, I'm drowning.
Got any limericks?
Huh?
Never mind. Talk about summer camp.
Sure.
You won a soccer game?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna hold this for you. You were playing soccer?
Yeah.
What is the best part about soccer?
Kicking the ball.
I'm gonna agree with you on that. What's the part you don't like so much?
Losing.
I think we can all agree with that one. This is very cool. Do you have any more jokes? Stories?
I do not know.
Tell you what, I'll make you a deal. Why don't we get your dad up here to tell his story, and if you've got something after that, you can come up again. Does that sound good? Okay. Any last thoughts?
Let's all please give a warm welcome to the one, the only, wait, probably not the one and the only, Ayman Nassab.
You stole my line. Ladies and gentlemen, Ayman.
Thank you, everyone, for making my son feel so welcome. He has been in an ad, so if you go on YouTube and search for IDRF Hide and Seek, that's him. Now, I love Storytellers Night because it's open-ended. It was a leading question that I asked, is there a theme? Because I would rather prefer there not being a theme. But since it is Storytellers Night, I wanted to touch on something that is a story I want to write. Like, you know how they all say, we all have a book inside each and every one of us? I know the title of my book. And hopefully, if I time it right, it'll be the last sentence I say on stage. But the story starts 38 years ago, 39 years ago, yeah. 2025, I turned, yes, sorry, 39 years ago, in a country that not many of you might be familiar with, Kuwait. I know Mike is familiar with it because I brought it up in previous stories. Basically, it's the exact opposite of Canada. It's a country that has no taxes, It's a country that has the strongest currency in the world. It's a country where Amir spent the first 5 years of his life. And contrary to what he was saying on stage, he loved it and he kept complaining about the cold when we moved here. So that's the other polar opposite that Kuwait has, that Canada does not. A sun that never goes away. Sun, S-U-N, not S-O-N. I was born in Kuwait. I spent my entire educational life in Kuwait. I moved back home to Egypt to go to university, and then I moved back to Kuwait where I started my career. A long, long time spent in a country that initially I loved more than anything. Whenever I would go back home to Egypt in the summer, I would tell people how Kuwait was so much better and how it was less noisy, it was less busy, because it's a population of 4 million people. Like Hamilton has a quarter of that officially, almost. Like we have 570 according to the signs on the 403. Pretty sure that number is no longer correct. Kuwait is 4 million people, 1 million citizens, and 3 million expats. And that's the other difference between Kuwait and Canada, in that when you move to Canada, the right way, there is a path to citizenship, where you end up belonging to the country that you're spending so much time in. In Kuwait, you remain an expat forever. Forever. And it gets, like, everyone is familiar with what is happening south of the border right now, right? Where Donald Trump, or as my nieces like to call him, dumb old Trump. It's a very smart thing coined by a 7 and an 8-year-old. Donald Trump is deporting people, and everyone is at arms at how illegal that is. Let me tell you that in Kuwait, that is just called maintaining the status quo, where any offense you do can be punishable by deportation, even if you were born in that country and you know nothing else besides that country. In certain cases, people were deported for something as arbitrary as writing something online that people do not agree with. Now you could think political dissidents, but I'll do you one better. It was a person complaining about the weather. Because another thing that Kuwait has, that Canada does not, is dust. Orange dust. You would wake up, look outside the window, and see a blanket of orange. So this new expat who had moved to the country decided to take to the internet and say, oh my God, I'm in hell. As a joke. Someone saw it, they didn't like it, complained about it, and that person was sent away. They were asked to leave that country. Now, I have the I'm fortunate enough to be able to travel back there, even though I left the country. And as I'm driving there, I was there in May, I had an epiphany in that I will never spend as much time in any country as I have in Kuwait, where I have stories for all the stories of buildings that used to be there that are not there anymore. Driving down any street is a memory on its own, because I have levels of being a child in school, being in university, starting my career. It was all happening there. I can drive in that country like that without having to use Google Maps. Here, I can get from my house to Mississauga without using Google Maps. And it struck me as very poignant that I would never be able to stay in that country, because unlike Canada, where You have PRs, you come for studies. There, you come as a resident, and so long as you have a job, you're allowed to stay. If you don't have a job, you cannot stay. Because going back to what I said earlier, strongest currency in the world, if you don't have income in that country, you cannot stay in that country. And it just felt so sad to love a place so much, yet not be loved back, not be loved in return. I always like to liken it to being at your aunt's house. Your aunt loves you almost as much as your mother does. She will give you her children's bed. She will feed you. But at some point in time, she will look at you and be like, you gotta go. And that's exactly how life in Kuwait felt, because contrary to what we all wanted, you know, the feeling of belonging, the sense of being in the right place, you don't get to have that when you are born in a country that doesn't welcome you past your usefulness. And the greatest tragedy is, even though you did nothing wrong, you find yourself born in a country where you don't belong. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Leave either side you want, or stay here and answer questions. Okay, that's incredible. You can tell me if this story is accurate. I lost my job shortly after 9/11. I was in a job finding course with a guy who had immigrated from Kuwait. He said he was there when the Iraqis came in. The story he gave me about getting out of the country, and I can't tell you where he drove. I mean, essentially, he drove across the border. Where'd he go?
Okay, I was 4 at the time that the invasion happened, and I have very stark memories of how it was. So I remember seeing a dead body in a KFC with a broken window. I remember us driving through, I think we drove through Iraq, and I remember seeing, like my parents were at a rest stop. I remember seeing sheep and a lot of flies, like more flies than I have seen in my entire life. I remember there were other kids on the drive from Kuwait to Egypt, and I was looking at the street and it was dark and there was a shadow and I thought it was a hole and I didn't want to go near the shadow because I might fall in. I remember getting on a ferry to get across the Red Sea to Egypt. So we did go through Iraq and Jordan, and then from Jordan to Egypt.
Okay. Again, I don't want to bring this up if it's painful.
No, go.
Don't mind me. This guy's name was Amir, by the way.
Amir means prince in Arabic.
Okay, there you go. What he told me was that I believe they drove to Jordan, and they were not in an area that had seen any violence. But they had been warned, have a lot of money in your car, have something tradable in your car. At best, no one's going to ask for it. He said by the time they got to the border, they were met by people with guns who essentially said, oh, you're leaving? Oh, okay, that's terrible. Well, we hope you come back sometime. By the way, what do you have for us? And his family had packed the car with bills and with jewels. And they said, that's not enough. And then they pulled out a second wad of bills and jewels. And by the third, they were told, we're going to turn our backs, and maybe you should start driving. When this happened to this guy, he was around 11 years old, and he said that nobody was scared exactly, but they were very aware that they were at somebody else's mercy. And he could not, within 3 months, they already had family in Canada. So when they came here, he said, you can't understand what it is. I barely spoke English. To have been in this country for my entire life, 3 months of confusion and terror, and then he's in Mississauga.
For more confusion.
Yeah, more confusion and terror, yeah. I tried to avoid that, I really did.
I'm new here, so I can make that joke.
But is that history? Is that?
It's absolutely correct. There's a series on Netflix called Mo. He's a comedian, Mo Amer.
My wife watches him.
Yeah. In his series, he documents, like there are little snippets where they showed you how it was to travel from Kuwait, because he was also born in Kuwait. And he moved to the US, he moved to Texas. So pretty much the same as Mississauga, just minus the heat. And the thing is, I was too young to understand, like, I don't know what my parents had to go through to get us out, because we were like driving in a convoy. So it was my dad in a car, and we had a second car that a friend of his was driving with his family. And all I can remember is just the path. But what we had to pay, all of that, I don't recall anything happening. But the Kuwaiti government did have because like we all had to leave our houses. And you weren't going to pack your TV, your couch, everything. You couldn't take that with you. So you had to leave it there. And then the people who stayed ended up ransacking these houses. So it wasn't just the invading army that did it. It was your neighbor who knows that you left. So what they did was they compensated everyone arbitrarily. Like it wasn't an exact compensation, but they were like, okay, so you stayed here and you left, so we're going to pay you this much, which didn't cover what you lost in your house, but it was something. So they did try to do something about it. But what we had to pay across the route, all I know is that when we were in Jordan, my dad told me that they weren't very friendly with us. They weren't very nice.
I can't even imagine it.
It was quite a challenge, quite a journey. I remember, I have memories of being on that boat and a kid stealing my plastic Mickey Mouse toy and running around with it. Like, I remember stuff across the drive, but what my parents had to do and how it was. My dad did tell me one story that when he was driving, so Arabs smoke shisha, and my dad used to smoke shisha a lot. Not a lot, like once, okay, he smoked shisha. He stopped when my son was born. And
that's the official story, yeah.
The only story he told me is that he was smoking shisha whilst driving, and he fell asleep. And he was only awakened by my mom helping him to get the car back on the road because it was almost going to go.
Nice of her to do that, yeah. God, I can't picture it.
Yeah.
I can.
Okay. You've led a more interesting life than I have. And so thank you for telling that story.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me answering my dumb questions.
Thank you for giving me that.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, Naaman. I just realized something. I've lost my phone. And that's a problem because, wait a minute, is that it? Audience participation, thank you very much. So I need to introduce the person who's about to come on. I hate reading my phone on stage, by the way, so if somebody wants to beat me up after the show, I think you're within your rights. The person who's going to come on, I met exactly, what time is it? Exactly 48 minutes ago. And she does not live in Hamilton. I think she told me she lives kind of in the Grimsby area. And she has some experience in spoken word. And I want to see what she has to do. Ladies and gentlemen, Phoebe Taylor. Oh my God. I had the entirely wrong person. Tell you what, can I do this whole thing over again?
Sure. That intro also works for me as well.
In that case, come on up, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. No, it's okay. Yeah, secret identity. That's wonderful. I'm to artists for kids, which is always very disappointing when you're somebody that wears a suit. I think, I never mean for that to be a joke, but it always gets a laugh. And I think my dad would be a really good dad to literally anybody else but a handful of artists. I think he would be a really great dad if he had a son named Chad, maybe, who also wore a suit, and he would say things like, "Oh, Chad, I'm so proud of you wearing your suit playing golf. What's your..." I can't even make a golf joke. I don't know enough about golf to make a reference. But yeah, my dad and I are just two very different people. My parents are divorced, if that isn't abundantly clear, by the way I'm standing up here. And so the summer, I think it was the second summer that my parents were divorced. I was a 16-year-old girl, very unimpressed by most of life. And my dad decided to take us to New York City, which would be a really exciting place to go when you're a 16-year-old girl, to go to New York City. But we did it the depressing divorced dad way, where we drove in a used minivan, and we stayed at a friend of a friend's other divorced dad's very depressing apartment in Princeton, New Jersey, very specifically not New York City. And something that's important to know about my dad is, despite living a very comfortable lifestyle now, we were always broke when we were kids. That was the story that we were told. There's this very infamous story of myself or my brother, I don't know who it was, when one of us was 3 years old, of chucking groceries out of the grocery cart, saying, "We don't have enough money, we can't afford any of this." And that's what we always heard growing up. "We can't afford any of this. This is too much money. We don't have enough money. We're broke." And so, because we were broke, we drove to New York City, and because we were broke, we stayed at this very depressing divorced dad's apartment. And throughout this trip, my dad picked every possible free activity or closest to free, low, no-cost activity that you could do in New York City with two kids. Instead of taking a Statue of Liberty tour around the island, we took the $3 ferry that goes from New York City to New Jersey across, and my dad just shouted out to point at the Statue of Liberty as we zoomed on by. We went to strawberry fields in Central Park, and I complained about walking the entire time because I'm a 16-year-old girl. I think I very rudely shouted out, I don't even know who, "Oh my God, this is, John Lennon is anyway." Oh, that was gonna be embarrassing for a second. I know who John Lennon is now. And then we stood in front of Rockefeller Center. That was another activity that we had for the day. And each day we would make this really long trek back and forth between Princeton, New Jersey, and New York City. So that meant driving in our minivan to the train station, getting on the train, riding the train into the city. I think riding the train into New Jersey, actually, and then getting on the ferry into the city. So that was our journey every day instead of just driving. And I was terribly unimpressed the entire time, but my dad is a very charismatic, tall Australian man, and so he was having a wonderful time the entire time that we were there with my siblings. And then on our last day, my dad comes to me and he says, "Today we're going to go to the Metropolitan Museum." And I was absolutely thrilled by this, but because I was 16, I went, "Okay." No, you never want to let on that you're actually having a fun time when you're a teenager. And we walked up to the Metropolitan Museum, and we walked inside, and that day on display was Alexander McQueen's body of work. Alexander McQueen is a fashion designer who had died a couple of years before the show was on. And I was absolutely thrilled and excited to be able to see Alexander McQueen's work. If you probably know who Alexander McQueen is without actually knowing who it is. He's the guy who chucked a bunch of robots, chucked paint on a dress on a model as she spun around on stage, as designers do. And so we walked up to the museum and we said, 3 tickets to the Alexander McQueen exhibit, please. And the woman said, "Yep, absolutely, just so you know, it's a 3-hour wait." And I knew that wasn't going to go over very well with my dad, who had absolutely zero interest in being there, and my little brother, who also has absolutely zero interest in being there. And so I said, "Guys, don't worry about it. It's fine. We'll just walk away. We can go back to Central Park. We can go back and look at another statue in another part of the city, I'm sure. Walk across the Brooklyn Bridge, all free activities. My dad said, no, this is really important to you. I'm going to stand here for the next 3 hours while you and your brother go explore the museum. I couldn't believe my luck. My brother and I, we walked around and we went to go see the Degas, Degas ballerinas, and we saw Van Gogh's sunflowers were there at the time, and I had the time of my life with my little brother as well. And because my dad is a very charismatic, outgoing, excitable Australian man, by the time that we had come back at 2 hours and 45 minutes into his 3-hour-long shift, he was friends with everybody else in the line. And we pulled up, they went, oh, you're Christopher Taylor's daughter. We know everything about you. We know everything about your life and his life growing up in Australia and how hard he works for you to be able to be here today. And we toured the museum, and it was truly one of the best days of my life. And my father and I still have this really tough relationship, but I'm so eternally grateful for him that he stood in that line for 3 hours. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate your time. Oh, yeah. Do you want me to stay up here?
Only if you want to.
Sure. I'm the eldest daughter. I love to be on stage.
That trip sounds like pretty much every trip I've ever heard about going to New York, because everyone needs to make a pilgrimage to something.
Yeah, absolutely. And why not do it in a minivan that has no air conditioning in it?
I took a bus once
No.
in Toronto, and that was, I woke up with an 8-year-old in my lap.
Like a megabus?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it was. The $1 megabus.
No, at the time, I think it was 12. It was a horrible idea, and at around 3 a.m, some kid had wandered down to the bathroom, climbed into my lap instead of their father's lap, who was 2 seats up.
Yeah. Well, you became a father that day.
Yeah, briefly. I kind of picked him up and said, has anyone lost a child? Wearing a red T-shirt. And everyone was asleep, and 2 people said, well, it could be mine. Maybe mine. I don't know. Wait a minute. Simon? Yeah, it's here you go. I went when I was 18 and did the same pilgrim. I wanted to go to the Algonquin Hotel, because that's where Dorothy Parker hung out. I wanted to go to the Chelsea, because that's where Dylan Thomas died, and Sid Vicious killed Nancy Spungen, and they've torn down the room, and there's a sign saying, we tore the room down, you can't find it, you cannot make a pilgrimage, get out of here, which is still there.
Yes.
So I get the experience, but I applaud you for being in a minivan, like from this area, from like Hamilton.
Yeah. I think it's like an 8-hour drive. It feels longer.
God bless you for your service.
Yes, thank you very
Cool,
much.
and I'm very sorry I mixed up your name.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, guys.
Wonderful story. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Phoebe, one more time. You make a mistake, leap into it with both feet. So having introduced the wrong person, can I introduce the right person this time? Everything I said previously, just stick it on to the next person who's going to come on. And I still have the interest, because I'm dying to find out what she has to say. Can I say it? Ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
Yeah, you can say my name.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brandy. Randy. Am I the only person who's craving a cigarette right about now? Also, I want to thank you very, very sincerely because I thought I was the only person in the world, albeit on a dare, who ever wrote Dr. Seuss erotica. I did, how many words? 1,200 words on a dare. And all I remember was the opening, which is, this is the story of Elmer McGiz, who went down, no, sorry. This is the story of Elmer McGiz, who woke up one morning and wanted shaved sniz. So he went downtown, where the shaved sniz is, and now he's a hit in the shaved sniz biz. That's all I remember. Thank you. I was thrown out of a club for that. And other reasons, that's another story. That was incredible. Please come back anytime. Across the board. And I'm going to introduce somebody who is always here because it's his space, quite literally. You are possessed of it. I think your name is on the lease and stuff like this. Jake's background, he will tell you himself. He is the founder of this space, and every time I'm here I have to say thank you for encouraging my behavior because he always has, and I'm always delighted to have him do anything. Ladies and gentlemen, Jake Schenk.
Thanks, everyone. I guess everyone's, well, I've heard a lot of talk about fathers tonight, and Eamon's here with Amir, and Amir's getting to hear a lot of adult content. And yeah, it's pretty great. It's pretty great. No, it's good. I think early exposure is a good thing. And my father, similarly, when I was living in Istanbul, this is 1972. That was the decade before the 80s, if you're, it was a long time ago. And so I was about 5 years old, and my dad was a bit of an underworld character. So I was basically with daddy daycare most of the time. He just took me around with him everywhere. So we'd go to, I'd spend time in bars, casinos, maybe the front doors of some brothels, all kinds of places like that, and I got exposure to that. And to me, I spent a lot of time in Istanbul downtown as a kid, and it seemed like my dad was always kind of trying to teach me about reality in some strange sense, because he would always, make a distinction between, that's bullshit and that's real, or that's a con, but that's an opportunity. That person is talking reality, and that person's, making up shit. So it was always, and to him, I guess the best, the evolutionary tactic for him to succeed in that environment was to actually determine what was real and what wasn't. Like who was bullshitting and who wasn't. Who was trying to take advantage of him and who wasn't. So he's always kind of teaching me that lesson about being on guard for that. And it might have fucked me up for quite a bit since then, but it's also been very useful. And to me, like that world that he was taking me through was reality, and that was real. Everything else seemed like bullshit, is the way it seemed. And when I was around that age, around 5, well, probably more like 4, my dad had to leave the country. He had some charges against him. He had some gambling debts, and they had some military coups, and you just didn't know who to bribe anymore, So he had to get out. And so I was kind of left with my mom during the day, which was unusual for me. It was a completely different lifestyle. Like instead of trying to look at a man's face and trying to determine if he was actually scared or not, I got to learn whether, this green pepper was better than the other green pepper. And it was a much more pleasant, calmer environment to be around. And one place in particular that she would take me to was outside of Istanbul. And back then in the 70s, you could go 20 minutes outside of Istanbul and you could be on a farm. That's, at least I thought it was a farm, but in retrospect, we would visit a cousin, which was, probably a suburban house with a big yard, which I wasn't used to at the time. And they had some chickens, they had a chicken coop, they had a goat. And to me, that seemed like a dream. Like, where am I? This is so weird. There's no other kids in the yard with me. I don't have to share the goat. I could have conversations with the goat, and I did. I had these dreamy conversations. I would stare the goat in the eyes, and I would start to imagine, what if it's actually a person pretending to be a goat? Because they had those eyes, they look at you, and it's amazing. Or what if it's some kind of a super intelligent alien being or something that's pretending to be a goat? Or what if it's God, just dressed as a goat, and I'm just like looking at him, having these psychic ideas of transferring between us. It's very dreamy. And much later in life, I would, I guess 40 years after that, I would take some psychedelics. And that was another way of opening up to me that there was a distinction between dreams and reality, but they often blurred, and quite often they blurred in very interesting ways. And on one particular day, when we went to visit our cousin on that, what I call the farm, and, having conversations with the goats, and sometimes I would try to get the chickens to escape because I found out what they were going to do to them, and, open up the chicken coop and get in trouble for letting them go, but they wouldn't run away. That was the problem. They didn't know. They just stuck around for the feed. So on one particular day, I'm just enjoying the dream that I'm living. And this farm was basically, so think of a suburban street where you have houses on either side. They're big lots. And then at the end of the dead-end street, you have a much bigger property, which is basically both sides of the street and the street in the middle. At one point, we heard a bunch of yelling and screaming and commotion, and we saw a bunch of people running towards us from the other side of the street, coming towards the end of the street. They ran into the yard, as probably the neighbors from 2 or 3 houses, and they said, "Quick, run, there's guys with guns outside, there's like terrorists or something is happening." And we all ran inside, which was essentially a shed. And maybe it's about the size of this carpet. And maybe there's like 7 people in there, and I'm kind of at the front corner here, and the door's there, and my mom is right behind me. And everyone's just really panicked, and they don't know what to do. And there's this one woman that's kind of freaking out. They're just, what are we gonna do? I'm gonna die. It's, like that. And the other guy, I don't know, maybe some kind of an uncle of hers, basically said, if you want to live, you gotta calm down. You gotta stop. And I got that message, and I thought, oh my God, I want to live. I like this place. Have you heard about balloons? Or cotton candy? Goats that you can talk to? So much more I want to experience. I want to stay here. And almost immediately I got this, okay. Just kind of closed my eyes, and I was calm, almost instantly. And I could hear my mom, I guess she was praying in my ear softly, and the woman is kind of making noises, and everyone's kind of breathing and like that. And while I'm doing that, all of those sounds with my eyes closed start turning into pictures and graphs and, geometric shapes. And I'm just floating. And a lot of the sounds also turn into music. And it's kind of like a synesthesia, And as I said, like 40 years later, when I take some psychedelics, I have very similar experiences. That was probably my first psychedelic trip that I had. But it allowed me to be completely calm, kind of a, some kind of a monk or whatever from the East. And I really enjoyed it. I was just floating. And all the sounds were still there, but they were turning into more beautiful, flowering, spandrels everywhere. And then I heard some rustling about, and the doors opened. Just before the doors opened, everyone just went, doors opened, and we saw a couple of soldiers with machine guns. And they said, it's okay, we've taken care of it, you can come out now. And I came back to this reality from another reality that seemed very real, and in some ways seemed preferable. And, at that instant, you're kind of blurring it, but you're going back and forth between them at the same time. There was a blurring between suburbia and the city, like dreams and reality. And I think I've taken that to heart in realizing that I think we're always dreaming, you know, in some strange sort of way, or maybe not so strange at all. You know, in a dream, you're kind of making sense of whatever your inputs are, right? You have these body sensations, you have memories, some things, triggers, and maybe you have, you know, indigestion. Your body takes all of these signals and makes a narrative out of it. And you're having a dream, like everything's starting to make sense to you, some kind of a story in that dream reality. But we do that in our waking reality as well. You know, this is what I've come to notice. You're taking in information, and your system that we call you is making sense of it. It's like, oh, there's this narrative. Oh, this is what's happening. Oh, here I am. This is me. You know, all of this, it's not that different than dreaming. Dreaming in reality, the city, suburbia. And it's interesting that I always lived in a big city until now. I live in Ancaster, which is kind of like the country. So it's weird. What my dad would have considered bullshit. I'm living and enjoying it. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Just one more time, please, for Jake Cheng. Do I get a story as well?
Yes.
Yes? I'm in front of the mic. Yeah, that kind of suggests IQ, right? I'll even give you a choice, because I've done that once or twice here. I can give you a comedy tragedy. I can give you drama, or I can give you something that, depending on your belief, could be seen as supernatural. Supernatural? Supernatural. Okay. Here's the thing. I started doing storytelling in Toronto, like I said, 15 years ago or so. I went to a party associated with a bunch of people I barely knew, and I had sort of known them in what I guess you could call a past life. I'd been an actor for a while, so there was someone I was in a play with once or twice, and there was a woman I'd sort of kind of slightly dated, and they had this buddy who had come in from the West Coast, and all that type of stuff. And we were essentially talking about what stories you remember. My line has always been, I will tell stories about stuff that I cannot bring myself to forget, whether they're good or bad. And somehow the topic went to violence, of course, because, you know, it does happen in the universe. One guy who was at the party was the classic friend of a friend of a friend. This guy had been in the army. He had been in Afghanistan. He was very quiet, and he was also really young. I mean, when this happened, I was around 39, and this guy was perhaps 30. And he started talking about violence, and somebody said, well, you know, you were in Afghanistan. Did you kill anybody? And he just stared at him, just this blank, I'm not answering that question kind of stare. So they tried to move the topic along very quickly, and someone said, well, I don't believe anyone in this room has ever dealt with, you know, violent death. And I was dumb enough to say, I have. But it's not quite what it sounds like. I used to have an apartment on Bayview Avenue in Toronto, which is a fairly nice area. It was affordable then. It's definitely not affordable now. And on the 4th floor, I had a balcony and everything, and the guy beside me had a bunch of plants, and he had a house cat, and he would travel. So he gave me an extra key. He trusted me. He said, I have nothing worth stealing. And he'd go away for a weekend. I'd go in, I'd water his plants, and I'd feed his cat. And I hadn't done that for a few months, and then Saturday afternoon, the police show up. And they said, we've been told that you have Richard's key. And I said, yeah, it's in my kitchen someplace. What's happening? And they said, well, this is a wellness check. Nobody's heard from Richard for a couple of days, so we can get the landlord to open it, but if we do that, we have to get, you know, a kind of a court order, and it's going to take us a while. And the landlord told us that Richard told him that you've got the key. At the end of the day, I just said, sure, I'll open the door for you. No one had heard from this guy for around 5 days. Here's what happens when, for reasons best known to yourself, you take a few bottles of sleeping pills and climb into your bathtub and cut your wrists. And no one knows about this for at least 5 days. I open the door, his cat runs out, the cops walk past me, one of them kind of squeezes my shoulder as he comes in, and I'm thinking, what the hell's happening? And then the smell hits me. Okay, without wanting to go into too much detail, the smell was nothing worse than you would find outside of a bar on a Saturday night. Sort of like whiskey vomit, sort of like rotten chicken, sort of like sour milk, but sweet. And that sweetness tells your brain that this is something dead. Get out. So without knowing what I was doing, and this took 10 seconds, the cop walks past me, the smell hits me. I'm suddenly in the stairwell, vomiting down the stairs. I'm not proud of this. And I don't remember going from the door to the stairs. My body took me, and my body said, you're leaving. By the way, you are grossed out to no end, thus the vomit. So I'm grossed out by what's in the hallway, in the apartment, and what I have produced. All at the same time. And I'm also thinking, that poor bastard, what happened to him? I didn't know him, but I knew him, and what happened? The cops came out. At this point, they were smoking. I'd forgotten that. I'd forgotten the cops always said, if you believe there's going to be a body, you buy the biggest, worst cigars you can buy. And they're both in the hallway smoking, and one of them said, no shame, soldier, to me. That's not a story you bring up very often, right? But it came up in this evening because there were a bunch of wannabe storytellers, and we had this enough of a history, and I brought it up. And the soldier didn't say much, but he did look at me. And eventually we went to other topics. I went outside to drink a beer, and this guy came out. He had a Newfie accent that I cannot properly replicate. I gotta try a little bit. He said, I know what that sounds like. I know what it smells like, you know? 'Cause I gotta tell you something. I had a friend over in Afghanistan, and we both got pinned down, and he got shot pretty bad, and I was okay. And I kept the wounds from getting too bad, and he didn't bleed to death or anything, but it was a very, very close thing. And we got back here, and I stayed in the service, and he took out because of the injury, and pretty soon he's on painkillers. And after that, he's on drinking, and after that, he's in the cemetery. And I said, okay, I'm really sorry I brought that up. And he said, well, he said, I know what the smell is like, and it's not from him. I knew about the funeral after he gone. And I'm living in Toronto. I've come here because I want to get a new life, and I got a new job. And I'm on a train, and 3 or 4 people down, it's the rush hour, and I can't deal with it. I'm not used to this. And I noticed 3 or 4 guys down. That's my buddy. That's James. And James has been dead 4 years, and he's on my train. I'm looking at him as if this is going to be a wind-up, like I'm waiting for the joke. And he just keeps talking. He says, James walks up to me, and he's slow. He's put on a little weight, and he's not looking good. He doesn't look bad. He doesn't look like a dead man, but I know he's a dead man. And he sort of smiles at me, and he says, you're not in trouble. And it's just sometimes people notice. And I looks at him, and I says, what are you talking about? How can you? And he said, you don't have to know, but sometimes things happen. Sometimes you're not here, you're not there, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm just got a job like everyone else for a while. That's what I'm supposed to do. I'm doing what I'm told. And the guy takes a very, very long drink, and he smokes half a cigarette, and I'm hoping he's going to walk away, but he doesn't. And he looks me straight in the eye, and he says, James looks at me, and he says, it's good to see you. Like, not a lot of people talk to me. But as he's getting closer, I know what the smell is. I'd walk past that in Afghanistan. I know what it smells like when your flesh is rotted. And it's not heavy on him. It's not like he stinks. It's not stinking, but it's just there. It's like someone, they got bad breath, and maybe they got a piece of gum or something, but that's what that's what it's smelling like to me right there. It's something that's just under the surface, and it's awful. It's enough you do not want to be close to him. There are people in the train who are turning their backs, and they don't know why, and he's talking to me like that. And the closer he gets and the more he is smiling, the worse I feel, and I have to back away. And I can see he is hurt by that. And what happened then? I offered him some money. I didn't know if he'd take it. I said, if you're working, do you need something? I got some, and he said, no, it's not like that. I just have to be here a while. And the train stops, and he's getting off the train like everyone else. And I said, are there a lot of you? And he stands in the door a moment, and he says, there are more than you are willing to look at. And he got off the train, and the train went away. So since then, in this city, I don't take the train anymore. I don't take streetcars. I try to walk everywhere. It's why I'm living downtown. Anyway, that's the smell I know. And he finishes his drink and he walks away. Best part about all this is that at the end of the evening, and I'm kind of in shock, finding the host saying, you know what, I think I've had enough fun for the evening, thank you. Any chance I could get one for the road so you can take a beer? No, I'd like something stronger, please. I knock back 3 shots of Jameson, and I say goodbye to everybody. And they said, yeah, maybe you got a story out of this. And I said, you have no idea. And this guy leaves a couple minutes after me. I'm waiting for a streetcar, and I think he's going to come over, but he doesn't. He stands in the road. It's like 15 years ago. He kind of waves down a cab because, like he said, I don't think he wants to take the subway or a streetcar anymore. So I will leave it up to you whether there is something here that no one here can understand, or whether this guy is an idiot. I pray to God he's an idiot. Thanks very much for your time. Good night. I think I'm about to get interviewed.
Well,
Fair is fair, yeah.
everyone, so yeah, it's turnaround is fair play. Big round for Mike.
Thank you.
Mike, the brilliance of your storytelling is how you incept the story, where you're telling us a story of you telling a story in your story, and someone else is telling you a story.
Thank you.
It's
In general, you're never part of one story. Someone tells you something because you're in an event that brought you there, which is a second story, and so on and so on. That was just one of the freakiest I'd heard. And to this day, I don't know whether he was giving me, he got on the cab and laughed his ass off for 20 minutes, or whether this gentleman is in desperate need of a psychologist, or maybe an exorcist. I don't know.
how did it make you feel? Like,
I felt honestly, I felt awkward. I mean, finding the guy who lived next to me in decay is not something that comes up often. I only mention it because I knew the people there. I'd either known them well enough a long time ago or trusted them enough to drop that without trying to be an anecdote. I had a great vacation, and I just bought a new car, and oh, by the way, there was my neighbor who smelled terrible when he was dying. I'm trying to give him more respect than that. So when he started talking, I didn't know whether, since you were actually a soldier, you've actually seen this type of thing. You think I'm taking the piss, or whether you think that I'm somehow trying to make fun of it. And he may have been doing the same thing to me. I don't know.
did you ever smell that again?
No. I mean, again, it's what I said. You can smell the elements. And I have to be fair. I stole that description. There was an American journalist. His name was P.J. O'Rourke. He wrote for National Lampoon, and after a while he became he started traveling and writing essays and so on. He mentioned that the smell was like whiskey vomit and so on and so on. It's just perfect. I mean, I'm not trying to steal it from him. Go behind a supermarket and you can smell rotten chicken. There's something there, but an actual human flesh, something in the back of your brain kicks in. It's not just grotesque. There's something that says, leave, get out of here. Or at the very least, you have to know what you are dealing with. There is nothing more serious than this. There's a chemical, there's a substance cadaver dogs get trained on. It's called cadaverine, which is essentially bodily fluids that get processed. And it smells like rotting flesh. You give it to a dog, they get used to it. Apparently med students will get a vial of it and splash it into somebody's car. And it will never get out of your car.
There's a fruit that smells like that. It's called durian. You ever heard of it?
I've eaten durian, and I never thought about rotting flesh at the time.
I will tell you this. Smell as a sense is very powerful. I remember back in Kuwait, I was running by a place where my school was, like my school in the early 90s, and this is in maybe around 2022. So that school was long gone. It was torn down. I was running by there one fine morning, and I can swear to you that for a millisecond, I smelled that school, even though it was no longer there. It's a new building. They built something else there, but for a millisecond, as I was running down the street, I could smell the school.
Sense memory is weird that way. The other story I would have told was the fact that I got dragged into, I was recounting something I lived through to a writing professor who didn't dismiss my story, but he gave an anecdote that I thought was really trivializing. And then something terrible happened to him along the same lines, and he decided to take it out on me. So I'll tell it at another event. It's sort of this weird figure eight of you start from one point, it triggers somebody else, which triggers something else, which may come back and slap you in the face. When he told me what had happened to him, I had immediate sense memory back to what I had witnessed. And I was messed up by that, and I was watching him being messed up by that and blaming me for the fact he was messed up. I mean, it gets awkward. That's not as immediate as scent, but there are still phrases. There are triggers that will knock you off.
Even the soliloquy is a story in a story. Thank you, Mike.
No,
thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Is there anybody out there who did not sign up who would like to do a set? And Jake, this is your place. If anyone wants to do a second set, would you allow it? Is there anybody else here who wants to try something else? I'm looking at, well, everybody. You want to come back up, Amir? Sure. Come on. You've learned a lot of words tonight. Here, come on, guy.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Hey, thank you for coming. Good night. Tell you what, sir, why don't you sit down? Or stand up, that's cool. And when you talk, kind of keep the microphone like that.
Okay. Okay, so, do you know about Pokemon?
Yes.
Do you have a favorite?
Charizard.
Charizard? Okay. I like to a lot.
You know, make it interesting. How about just the third one on that? What's the third one?
What do you mean the third one?
The third card. What is it?
Charizard?
Oh, wow. That's really cool. Yeah, that's the one.
Okay. That's it?
Thank you.
I
Thank you very much, Amir. I heard a rumbling that somebody may have more poems. You might. This is a binary issue here. You do or...
Absolutely have more poems.
Are they also Stevie?
Of course they are.
Are they also in the scenario that they are for select ears only?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, for God's sake, you got to read them then.
All right. Okay. Apparently I have some in my purse.
Do you want to hold the mic or have it stand before you, for want of a better term?
We'll try both ways.
Woohoo.
We can leave it there. Okay.
One more time, Randy.
One more time. Okay. This piece is called The Divine, and I wrote it while I was in Italy at a Tuscan retreat in which I did nothing but eat
Exquisitely cool. Thank you again, Brandy. We're at the end of all this. I just want to give a moment and say thank you one more time to everybody who has been here, anybody who's watching out there. If you are watching the live stream, come to Hamilton for one of these events. There's going to be at least 2 storytelling events each month. There is a fringe show, actually 3 of them happening here in July. And there's always something happening. I recommend you go to cfta.live to get details. Everybody who's here, thank you for being here. Jake and Dex, thank you for your patience and once again encouraging my behavior. Everybody else go home. And for God's sake, thank you for those stories. Woo! Good night, everybody.